The bright sun of a summer's day at Glenelg Beach in South Australia seemed to shine a little too warmly that January 26, 1966. It was Australia Day, and the small coastal town, just a short drive from Adelaide, was brimming with holidaymakers enjoying the golden sand and the cool, crisp waves. But in the midst of the seemingly idyllic day, something darker was about to unfold, something that would never be forgotten, something that would haunt the town for decades. Jane Beaumont, the eldest at 9 years old, was always the responsible one. With her dark brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, she walked with her younger siblings, 7-year-old Arna and 4-year-old Grant, toward the beach. It wasn't unusual for the 3 children to visit the beach by themselves. Their mother, Nancy Beaumont, trusted them. Jane, after all, had been taught how to look after her siblings, and Glenelg was a popular spot for families. The children were more than capable of handling themselves for a few hours. At least, that's what everyone thought. For Jane, Arna, and Grant, this was supposed to be another carefree day of playing in the sand, splashing in the surf, and enjoying the sunshine. The beach was crowded and there were people everywhere. Their mother had watched them walk toward the shore, noting how excited they were to be free of the usual rules and constraints. It was a day like any other. But no one knew then that it would be the last time anyone would see the Beaumont children alive. By mid-afternoon, when Nancy returned to pick them up, the beach was still full of people, but there was no sign of her children. Her heart began to race as she searched frantically for them. She checked the sand, the dunes, the lifeguards station, but there was no sign of Jane, Arna, or Grant. They hadn't returned to their usual spot by the water. As the minutes ticked by, a sickening feeling settled deep in her gut. She approached a nearby lifeguard who seemed equally concerned when he heard her story. The lifeguard confirmed that no one had seen the children leave, but he couldn't offer any concrete information. The children were supposed to be there, right? They wouldn't have just wandered off. But they had. The reality of the situation was becoming clearer with every passing moment. Something was terribly wrong. Nancy's search was futile. As dusk fell over the beach, the panic began to set in. Where could they be? Had something happened to them? Was it possible they had wandered off with someone else? Or worse, had they been taken? That night, the police were called. The investigation began, but there were few leads to follow. The children had simply vanished. The only clues left behind were their belongings neatly placed beside the towels they'd left behind on the sand. Their shoes, their bags, their clothes, all exactly where they'd left them. It was as though they disappeared into thin air. No one had seen anyone suspicious around them, no one had heard anything unusual. The disappearance made no sense. As the hours passed, the police expanded their search, asking everyone on the beach if they had seen the children. Local newspapers published urgent reports about the missing Beaumont children, and the community was thrust into a state of unease. Parents clutched their children a little tighter. The streets of Glenelg, once so vibrant with summer activity, now felt haunted by an inexplicable terror. Days turned into weeks, and despite the best efforts of the police and volunteers, there was no trace of Jane, Arna, or Grant. The investigation began to unravel, but the clues were far too few to make any headway. At one point, there were reports of sightings. A man in a red car who seemed to have been loitering near the children on the beach. But when the police tracked him down, they discovered he was just another dead end. It seemed that no matter where they looked, the case grew colder by the day. But there was one clue, one strange and unsettling piece of evidence that would eventually haunt investigators long after the search had ended. 3 days after their disappearance, a man came forward claiming he had seen the children playing near the beach on the morning of January 26th, hours before their disappearance was reported. The man described seeing a figure standing behind the children, someone who appeared to be watching them from a distance. The man, a local, hadn't thought much of it at the time. But when the children went missing, he couldn't shake the feeling that the figure he'd seen that day was connected to their vanishing. However, despite this witness testimony, the police could not identify the man, nor could they find any physical evidence to support the theory. It was at this point that the town of Glenelg began to change. The once safe beaches and bustling streets now felt eerie. The specter of the missing children hung over the community, and the feeling that something terrible had happened, and was still happening, began to sink in. What happened to the Beaumont children? Why had they disappeared without a trace? Weeks turned into months, and the town of Glenelg moved on. But the mystery lingered. The case grew colder. Over the years, there would be countless theories, rumors, and speculations, but no answers. And as the case remained unsolved, the haunting image of the 3 children's last day at Glenelg Beach would never fade. But for one investigator, the story wasn't over. It wasn't until years later that the case would come back into the public eye, when a true crime enthusiast named Alex Mitchell stumbled across an old article detailing the disappearance of the Beaumont children. He had heard the name before. Who hadn't? The haunting images of 3 missing children had always stayed with him, but he never thought much of it until he began researching it for his own project on unsolved mysteries. As Alex dug deeper, he became obsessed with the case. The more he read, the more he realized that there was something off about the disappearance. There were too many strange elements, too many gaps in the investigation. It seemed as though the authorities had missed something, or perhaps they had been deliberately led off course. The questions mounted. Why had the children's clothes been left behind so carefully? Why had there been no signs of a struggle? Why had no one seen or heard anything? But most chilling of all was the strange feeling Alex had when he watched the news footage again, this time with fresh eyes. In the background of the original photo taken of the children at the beach, something or someone caught his attention. It was a shadowy figure, half hidden behind a nearby tree, and as Alex zoomed in, he could see the distinct outline of a man, watching them. But who was he? And why hadn't anyone noticed him before? Was the disappearance of the Beaumont children a simple case of abduction? Or was it part of something much larger? Something more sinister, hidden just below the surface? As Alex dove deeper into the mystery, something else began to happen. Something that would forever change the course of the investigation. Unbeknownst to him, there were people watching his every move. People who had been watching the Beaumont children since that last fateful day at Glenelg Beach. And they didn't want Alex getting too close. As the night wore on, Alex received an email. No subject, just a single line. You're digging in the wrong place. Drop it now or else. He stared at the message, his heart pounding. Who was watching him? And what did they know about the children's disappearance that he didn't? Alex had only just scratched the surface, but what lay beneath was far darker than anything he could have imagined. The email sat on Alex Mitchell's screen, haunting him with a cryptic warning. You're digging in the wrong place. Drop it now or else. His heart raced. A cold sweat formed on his brow. He knew he should step away, leave this case behind, and ignore the disturbing message. But something about the Beaumont children's disappearance had struck a chord deep within him. He couldn't let it go, not now. He was too close, he felt it in his gut. He had uncovered something that others hadn't, something that felt off. But what was it? And who was watching him? Despite the ominous warning, Alex couldn't bring himself to drop the investigation. He closed the email without replying, his fingers trembling as they hovered over the keyboard. There was still so much to uncover. He'd started by researching the case from the very beginning, back to the day Jane, Arna, and Grant had disappeared. The more Alex read, the stranger the case seemed. It wasn't just the eerie nature of their disappearance. It was the absence of answers, the fact that the police had been unable to make any real progress. Everyone had heard the stories, but no one had ever really understood what had happened on that warm summer day in 1966. The family's story had been widely publicized, but what many didn't know was that Nancy Beaumont, the children's mother, had privately accused the police of failing her family. She had pushed them for answers, questioning their methods and their lack of urgency. But the police insisted that they had followed all the leads. There simply weren't any clues left behind. There were no eyewitnesses, no ransom notes, no signs of a struggle. The only witness was the lifeguard, who had seen the children playing near the water, but he hadn't seen anything unusual. There had been no suspicious figures, no red flags. Just a peaceful day at the beach until it wasn't. But Alex knew something was wrong. He couldn't shake the feeling that there were pieces to this puzzle that were being intentionally ignored, or worse, hidden. He had seen the photograph of the children playing near the beach and the faint outline of a man in the background. That man was still a mystery, but there was something else that had caught his attention. The man in the photograph wasn't just a random passerby. Alex had traced the location where the photo had been taken and confirmed that it was near a spot on the beach where the children were last seen. This detail alone had sparked his curiosity. The figure wasn't a tourist. It wasn't someone who had just been passing by. It was as though he had been deliberately placed in the frame, almost as if he was positioning himself to watch the children. So, Alex dove deeper into the photograph, enlarging it, adjusting the contrast, looking for anything that could give him more information. He zoomed in on the shadowy figure. There was something about him that sent a chill down his spine. The man was standing in the background, partially obscured by a tree. He seemed to be looking directly at the children, but his face was hard to make out. Still, Alex could make out a few details. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and appeared to be wearing a dark jacket, despite the warmth of the day. After several hours of examining the photograph, Alex stumbled upon an interesting lead. In one of the archived police reports, there was a mention of a man seen in the area the day the children disappeared. The man was said to be walking alone, but when the police questioned local witnesses, no one could identify him. He wasn't from the area, and no one could recall having seen him before. The police had dismissed the sighting as irrelevant, yet here Alex was, looking at a photograph that might just corroborate that very witness statement. He wasn't ready to let it go. There had to be something more to this mysterious man, and that man might be the key to unlocking the truth. Determined to follow this thread, Alex contacted an old local journalist who had reported on the Beaumont case back in the 1960s. A man named Jack Carter, who had been one of the first to publish details about the investigation. Jack was now retired, but his knowledge of the case and its nuances was unrivaled. Jack, Alex began cautiously after a brief introduction. I'm looking into the Beaumont children case, and I've come across a photograph that might offer a new lead. Do you remember anything about a suspicious man being seen near the children on the day they disappeared? Jack was silent for a moment. Then his voice came through the phone, low and grave. You've done your homework, haven't you? Alex paused, unsure of what Jack meant. I'm just following the leads, he said, his tone almost apologetic. Jack chuckled softly, though the sound didn't carry any warmth. It's a case that's haunted a lot of us, kid. We've all tried to make sense of it, but it doesn't make sense. It never did. That man you're asking about? He was seen by a witness, yes, but there was something odd about him. Something that never sat right with anyone who saw him. Alex leaned forward in his chair, his heart pounding. What do you mean? Jack's voice grew even quieter, as if he was afraid someone might overhear. The man who was seen near the children? He wasn't just anyone. He was a regular. A man who had been in and out of Glenelg for years, but no one knew who he really was. No one knew where he came from. He'd come into the town, stay for a while, and then disappear again. Never anyone's friend. Never anyone's enemy. Just there. A ghost. Alex's blood ran cold. Do you know his name? Did anyone ever catch up with him? That's the thing, Jack continued, his voice barely above a whisper. No one ever caught up with him. Not officially. Not in any police reports. He was just there. And then, just like that, he was gone. After the children disappeared, he wasn't seen in the town again. Not once. But people say he was always lurking around, watching. Watching the kids, the families, the people who came to the beach. Jack's words sent a wave of unease over Alex. The figure in the background of the photograph, the mysterious man who had been seen near the children, it was him, wasn't it? But why was this man always so elusive? And what did he know about the children's disappearance that no one else seemed to understand? Alex hung up the phone, his mind reeling. The investigation was no longer about the children alone, it was about finding this man, the one who had been there, in the background watching. He was the key to solving the case. But as Alex prepared to delve deeper into this shadowy figure's past, something strange happened. The moment he closed his laptop, a knock sounded at his door. A sharp, urgent knock. Alex's heart skipped a beat. Who could it be at this hour? He opened the door cautiously, only to find no one standing there. Just an envelope sealed tight and lying on the ground. It was addressed to him. The envelope was marked with a single, chilling phrase, "You're closer than you think." Alex hesitated, then slowly opened it. Inside, there was a single photo, a photo of the same man, from the beach, taken from a different angle. The man's face was clearer now. But the most chilling detail was his expression. He wasn't just watching the children. He was smiling. The photograph stared back at Alex with chilling clarity. The figure from the beach, the man with the enigmatic smile, was no longer a blurry ghost in the background. His face was now fully visible. The smile was unsettling, almost predatory in its calmness. The photo was taken from a distance, but the look in the man's eyes, it was like he knew something that no one else did. Something he wasn't ready to share. Alex sat frozen, staring at the photo. His thoughts raced. Was this the man who took Jane, Arna, and Grant? Was this the key to the mystery? He felt closer to the truth than ever before, but at the same time further away. The photo had answered some questions, but it had raised more. "You're closer than you think," the note had said. But closer to what? The man? The truth? Or something even darker? Alex was jolted from his thoughts by the sound of his phone vibrating on the table. He glanced at the screen, an unknown number. He hesitated before answering. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was low and strained. "I know what you're doing." Alex's blood ran cold. "Who is this?" "Someone who's been following your investigation," the voice replied, a hint of menace in it. "You're digging into something that shouldn't be dug into." "Why?" Alex asked, his voice trembling despite himself. "What's the truth? Who is the man in the photo? And why didn't anyone ever catch him?" The voice chuckled darkly. "You think you're the first to ask these questions? You're not. But there are things in this town, things about that man, that you don't want to know. People have gone missing before, and they've kept their mouths shut for a reason." Alex felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. "What do you mean? What reason?" "You'll find out soon enough," the voice said cryptically, then hung up. Alex stared at the phone, his mind racing. The voice was unsettling, but it didn't offer much in the way of answers. Instead, it had raised even more questions. What had he gotten himself into? And why were people so terrified to talk about the man in the photo? Alex took a deep breath, forcing himself to refocus. He couldn't let fear control him. He had to keep going. The pieces were falling into place, and he couldn't afford to stop now. He went back to the photo, studying it once again. He could see the outline of a building in the background, something he hadn't noticed before. It was faint, but it looked like an old hotel or inn. The building wasn't far from the beach where the children had disappeared, and it seemed to be connected to a few other mysterious disappearances in the area. Could this be where the man had been hiding out? Determined to get more answers, Alex contacted Jack Carter again. Jack had been around for years, and if anyone knew about the strange happenings in the area, it was him. Alex dialed Jack's number and waited, the line ringing for what felt like an eternity before Jack picked up. "Alex? You're back already?" Jack's voice had a sarcastic edge to it, but Alex didn't care. He was past pleasantries. "Jack, I need to know everything you can tell me about a hotel in the area near where the children disappeared. I think it's tied to the man in the photo." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "What hotel?" Jack asked, his voice sharp. "It's an old building not far from the beach. It looks like a small inn or motel just behind the sand dunes. I think the man might have been staying there." Jack sighed deeply. "If it's what I think it is, you're digging into something that's better left buried." Alex's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" "That place," Jack continued, his voice lowering, "is called the Dunes Motel. It was a regular stop for all kinds of people, including some who were, well, let's just say they weren't the type you'd want to associate with. It's been closed for years, but back in the 60s, it was a hub for all kinds of shady activity. People would come and go, no questions asked. It wasn't just a place for travelers, it was a place for people who needed to hide." Alex felt a chill run down his spine. So this man could have been hiding there? Is there any connection between the dunes and the Beaumont children? Jack didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was grim. The dunes was known for two things, its secrecy and its disappearing act. There were rumors about it, rumors that the police either ignored or didn't believe. It was said that people who stayed there, well, they didn't always check out the way they were supposed to. Alex's mind was spinning. "Are you saying the children could have been taken there? That they could have been—" "I'm not saying anything," Jack interrupted. "But I'll tell you this. I've never been able to prove it, but I've always suspected that the Dunes Motel played a bigger role in the disappearance than anyone realized. People don't just vanish like that, Alex. Not unless there's someone pulling the strings." Alex's thoughts raced as he hung up the phone. The Dunes Motel. It was the perfect place for someone to lay low, to remain unnoticed, to blend in with the shadows. He couldn't shake the feeling that the man in the photo had been a regular there, that he knew exactly how to disappear and leave no trace behind. But why had the man been watching the children? Had he known them? Or had he simply been waiting for an opportunity? With the photo in hand and a new lead in mind, Alex set out for the location. He had to see the Dunes Motel for himself. Maybe, just maybe, he would find something, anything, that could finally bring the answers he had been searching for. When Alex arrived at the site of the Dunes Motel, it was even more eerie than he had imagined. The building stood abandoned, its windows boarded up, the faded sign hanging crookedly from the front. It looked like a relic from a bygone era, forgotten by time and left to rot in the sun. But as Alex approached the front gate, something made his skin crawl, a feeling that he wasn't alone. He glanced around. The parking lot was empty, save for a few rusted cars that had clearly been abandoned long ago. But there was a presence here, something intangible but very real. A sense of watchfulness. As he crept closer to the building, Alex's eyes caught a figure in the distance, standing by one of the boarded-up windows. For a moment, his heart stopped. Was it the man from the photograph? Had he followed him here? But before Alex could react, the figure vanished, slipping back into the shadows. Alex stood frozen at the entrance of the Dunes Motel, staring at the shadow that had disappeared into the darkness. The eerie stillness of the abandoned building seemed to stretch on forever, as if time itself had been suspended. His heart pounded in his chest as he scanned the perimeter, wondering if he was imagining things or if someone truly was watching him. The sensation of being followed was undeniable now. He could feel it, a tightening in his chest, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. There was something about this place, this motel, that unsettled him to his core. It was as though the past, with all its hidden secrets, was seeping into the present, reminding him that the Beaumont children were not the only ones to have vanished in this area. With trembling hands, Alex reached for his camera and began snapping pictures of the dilapidated building. The windows were boarded up tightly, but the peeling paint and overgrown vegetation gave it an almost forgotten quality. It had the look of a place abandoned for decades, untouched and untouched by time. But Alex had learned that places like this, with their dark histories, often held more than what the eye could see. As he approached the back of the motel, the hairs on the back of his neck stood up once again. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him from inside, hidden behind the rusted curtains of one of the rooms. His mind raced. What if the man in the photograph had been here all along? What if he was still hiding in the shadows? Alex pushed the thought aside, his focus shifting to the task at hand. He had to find something, anything, that could lead him closer to the truth. He walked toward the rear of the motel, where a narrow alleyway ran alongside the building. It was darker here, the light from the setting sun barely penetrating through the thick clouds. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of mold and decay. He had to get inside. The door to the back alley was ajar, creaking softly as it swayed in the breeze. Alex hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should turn back. But the feeling that he was on the brink of something huge, the piece of the puzzle that had eluded so many for years, kept him moving forward. He stepped into the alley, his footsteps muffled against the cracked asphalt. It was then that he saw it. A rusty metal door, half hidden behind a cluster of overgrown vines. It was different from the others. There was a peculiar heaviness to it, as if it had been tampered with. Alex's heart skipped a beat as he moved closer. The door was cracked open, just enough for him to slip through. He pushed it gently and stepped into the dimly lit room beyond. The musty air inside the room made him gag, but he pressed on. The room was small, filled with old furniture covered in dust, long-forgotten mementos, and scraps of paper scattered across the floor. But what caught his attention was a large, industrial-sized water tank in the corner of the room. It was old, its metal exterior rusted and worn from years of neglect. But there was something unsettling about it, something that made Alex's blood run cold. He had seen something like this before on the news. The body of Elisa Lamb, found in a water tank on the roof of the Cecil Hotel, her death shrouded in mystery. The similarity between the two incidents was chilling. What was it about water tanks? Why were they so often connected to these unsolved disappearances? Alex approached the tank cautiously, his mind racing with possibilities. Could it be? Was there something inside? He peered over the edge, his breath catching in his throat as he searched for any signs of movement. But the tank was empty, save for a few discarded items floating on the surface. Nothing that could give him any clues about the Beaumont children, but the very presence of the tank made him uneasy. He turned away from the tank, his mind struggling to process the strange feeling of dread that had taken hold of him. The room felt colder now, as though the walls themselves were closing in. The shadows seemed deeper, darker, more suffocating. He needed to leave, but something told him he wasn't alone. Just as Alex turned to head for the door, he heard a faint sound behind him, like the creak of a floorboard, a movement in the shadows. He spun around, his heart hammering in his chest. There, in the corner of the room, a figure stood watching him. It was the man from the photograph. The one who had been lurking in the background on the beach, the one who had been watching the children. The figure remained motionless, but the air grew thick with an unspoken tension. Alex's mind raced as he tried to comprehend what he was seeing. The man was wearing the same dark jacket, the same tall, imposing figure that had haunted the edges of his investigation. "You've been looking for me," the man said in a low, gravelly voice. "But you should have stayed away." Alex froze, his instincts screaming at him to run, but his legs wouldn't move. His gaze locked with the man's, and for the briefest moment Alex thought he saw a flicker of something in the man's eyes, something cold, predatory, and ancient. "What do you want?" Alex asked, his voice barely a whisper. The man stepped closer, his presence suffocating. "I'm the one who's been watching," he said slowly. "I've watched many, just like you. And you're not the first to dig into the past. But you'll be the last." The room seemed to close in around Alex as the man's words settled into his mind. Was this it? Was this the moment where everything he'd been searching for would finally be revealed? Or was this just the beginning of something far darker? Suddenly, a loud crash sounded from behind him and the man vanished into the shadows, leaving Alex alone in the room once again. Alex turned toward the sound, his heart pounding in his chest. What had caused the noise? Was someone else here? The room felt more suffocating by the second. He turned back to the water tank, his eyes darting around the room. The figure was gone, but the sense of dread remained. He had to get out of here before it was too late. As Alex stumbled backward toward the door, his foot hit something on the floor. He looked down and saw a small, faded photo, a picture of the Beaumont children. Their faces smiled back at him, frozen in time, but the most disturbing detail was the background, the same water tank. The water tank in this very room. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The man, the one who had been watching them, had been here all along. He had been part of the motel's dark history, part of a web that had been tangled for years. The children weren't just lost, they were taken, hidden, kept in the shadows. And the man had played a role in their disappearance, perhaps in more ways than Alex could ever have imagined. The water tank was more than just a relic of the past. It was a symbol, a final resting place. Alex bolted for the door, but as he reached for the handle, he heard it. A faint, distant sound like the slow drip of water. And then the unmistakable sound of a door creaking open. Someone was coming. The distant sound of footsteps echoed in the narrow hallway, growing closer with each passing second. Alex's heart thudded in his chest, a mix of dread and adrenaline racing through his veins. The room around him seemed to shrink, the air growing thicker with every breath he took. He needed to leave, needed to get out of this place before whatever or whoever was coming found him. His hand trembled as he reached for the door, but just as his fingers brushed the handle, the door swung open on its own. Alex froze. There, standing in the doorway, was the man, the one from the photograph. The one who had been watching the Beaumont children. He was no longer a shadow, no longer a figure lurking in the background. He was here, in front of Alex, his presence suffocating and all-encompassing. "You're too curious for your own good," the man said, his voice calm and cold, like he had all the time in the world to deal with Alex's questions. Alex stepped back instinctively, his breath caught in his throat. There was no escape now. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. The man didn't move, but his gaze never left Alex. It was as if he was reading him, seeing through him, understanding exactly what he feared. Alex didn't know what to say, but his mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of the investigation that had brought him here. This man, the one who had been watching the children, the one who had been in the background of the photograph, he was involved in the disappearance, of that Alex was sure. But what was his role? And why had he been so elusive? "Who are you?" Alex asked, his voice hoarse with the weight of his fear and frustration. "What happened to the Beaumont children?" The man's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "You think you can just waltz in here and uncover everything? You think you can solve it all? You're just like the others. You don't understand the game. The pieces, the players, they all fit together, but you're too close to the truth now. And that can be dangerous." Alex clenched his fists, frustration bubbling up inside him. "Tell me what happened. Tell me where they are." The man's expression darkened. "You want to know the truth? The truth is that it's never been about the children. It's never been about the bodies. It's about something much darker. Something that's been buried beneath the surface for years. They were just pawns, Alex. Just like you are now." A chill ran down Alex's spine. What was the man talking about? Pawns? Buried beneath the surface? The pieces were there, but they didn't fit together. Yet somehow in the pit of his stomach, Alex felt as though he was about to uncover something so deeply unsettling that it would change everything. Why the children? Alex pressed, his voice shaking but determined. Why take them? Why take innocent kids? The man stepped forward, his eyes never leaving Alex's. You think they were innocent? They weren't the first, and they won't be the last. They were just a part of something much bigger, much more organized than you can imagine. They were meant to be taken, meant to disappear. Just like the others before them. You've only seen the surface, Alex. But there's so much more underneath. Alex's pulse quickened as the words sank in. What was he saying? This wasn't just a case of a random abduction. This was something planned. Something orchestrated. But by whom? And why? The man continued, his voice low, almost hypnotic. You want the truth? The real truth? The Beaumont children were never meant to be found. They were taken to protect something. Something that should never be uncovered. Something buried deep in this town. And you're getting too close to it. The silence in the room felt deafening as the weight of the man's words pressed down on Alex. He wasn't just dealing with a random criminal. No, this was bigger. This was something far more sinister than a simple disappearance. The Beaumont children were part of a much larger, hidden web that no one had been able to see until now. But before Alex could press the man further, there was another sound, this time from the hallway outside the room. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, like the footsteps of someone running toward them. The man's face shifted slightly, his cold smile replaced by an expression of caution. "We need to leave," the man said abruptly, his voice shifting from calm to urgent. "Now." Before Alex could react, the man grabbed his arm and yanked him toward the door, pulling him out of the room and into the dark hallway. The once abandoned motel seemed alive now, filled with noise and movement. Alex's mind raced, but he couldn't think straight. He had no idea where he was being dragged, what was happening. The man shoved Alex toward the stairwell, his grip tight around his arm. "Move quickly," he hissed, his voice sharp. "There's no time to waste." Alex stumbled, his heart pounding in his chest as the weight of the situation finally settled in. The man wasn't just trying to stop him from finding the truth. He was trying to protect something. Something that had been buried for years. And whatever that was, it was about to be uncovered. The man led Alex up the stairs to the second floor of the motel, where the air was thick with the smell of mildew and decay. They moved quickly, the footsteps echoing through the empty halls. At the far end of the hallway, the man stopped in front of a door, and without hesitation, he swung it open. Inside, the room was dark, save for a faint, flickering light coming from an old lamp. The man stepped inside, pulling Alex along with him. As the door slammed shut behind them, Alex's eyes adjusted to the dim light, and he saw what the man had been hiding. In the center of the room was an old wooden chest, covered in dust and cobwebs. It seemed out of place in the otherwise decrepit surroundings, but there was something about it that felt important. The man walked toward the chest, kneeling in front of it and placing his hand on the lid. "You want the truth, Alex?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is where it all started." He lifted the lid, revealing what lay inside. Alex felt his breath catch in his throat as his eyes fell on the contents of the chest. Piles of old, yellowed documents, photographs, and artifacts, each one carefully preserved as though someone had gone to great lengths to keep them hidden. But among the papers and photographs was something far more chilling. A set of old, blood-stained clothes, children's clothes. Alex's stomach lurched. He didn't want to believe it, but the truth was staring him in the face. These were the missing pieces of the puzzle. And now he was too far in to back out. Alex stood frozen before the chest, the weight of the moment pressing down on him like a heavy stone. The blood-stained clothes, children's clothes, rested there in the dim light as though placed there with the utmost care. His mind struggled to process what he was seeing. He had come here to uncover the truth about the Beaumont children, to discover what had happened to them that fateful day at Glenelg Beach. But what he was now faced with wasn't just an answer, it was a nightmare. The man who had led him here stood by silently, his expression unreadable. He didn't seem surprised by Alex's reaction. In fact, he seemed to expect it. His eyes flicked to the chest and then back to Alex, as if weighing the decision to reveal more. "Do you understand now?" the man asked, his voice quiet but insistent. It wasn't about the children. It was never about them. It was always about control. Alex swallowed hard, his throat dry. He couldn't tear his gaze away from the clothes. The reality of it hit him like a punch to the stomach. "Control? What are you talking about?" he demanded, his voice shaking. "These are the Beaumont children's clothes, aren't they?" The man stepped closer, lowering his voice even further. "You think their disappearance was just a random act? An abduction?" "No, Alex. It was orchestrated. It was part of something much bigger. The Beaumont children were just one piece of a much larger game." Alex felt his chest tighten. The pieces were falling into place, but they weren't the pieces he had expected. The notion that this had all been a carefully planned operation, something more sinister than a single crime, was almost too much to bear. But why? Why them? Alex asked, his mind struggling to comprehend the implications. Why were they taken? What was the purpose? The man's lips curled into a faint smile, but it wasn't a smile of kindness. It was cold, calculating. "You're not the first to ask, Alex. You won't be the last." The Beaumont children were chosen for their innocence. But it wasn't just about them. It was about sending a message. It was about control. Control of the system, of people, of the ones who are weak, who won't question. They were a part of something much bigger, a ritual that's been going on for decades. Alex felt a chill crawl up his spine. Rituals? This wasn't just about a criminal act anymore. It wasn't just about a man abducting children for some twisted thrill. This was something far deeper, darker. He needed to know more. He stared at the clothes, his mind racing. And this ritual, does it involve other disappearances? Is it something that's happened before? The man nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing. Yes. The Beaumont children were only one chapter in a very long story. There have been others, Alex. Other children, other families who've disappeared. Some never to be found, others found in pieces, literally. He paused as though weighing his words carefully. But the ritual doesn't just stop at the children. It's bigger than that. It's about power. Power that has been passed on, hidden, buried. Alex's heart pounded faster. He had stumbled upon something that was bigger than he could have imagined. The Beaumont children were only the beginning, but what was the true extent of the conspiracy he had uncovered? How many more had been lost to this dark web of power? The man moved toward the chest again, his hand brushing over the clothes gently, almost reverently. They wanted to create fear. They wanted to make sure that no one would ask questions. That no one would dig too deep. But now that you're here, Alex, now that you're getting too close. He looked at Alex with a knowing, almost pitying expression. You've already seen too much. You've gone too far. Alex took a step back, his pulse quickening. What do you mean? What happens now? The man's smile faded and his tone became steely. Now we wait? They're always watching. They've known about you for some time. You think you're alone in this investigation, but there are eyes on you. Eyes that have been watching your every move. You've stirred the hornet's nest, Alex. And once you've stirred it, there's no going back. Alex's mind reeled. The pieces were finally coming together. But the more he uncovered, the more questions arose. What kind of power could orchestrate something like this? What was the true nature of this ritual the man spoke of? And who were they? The answers were just out of reach, and the man before him seemed to know all too well what would happen if Alex pushed any further. Suddenly, there was a loud thud from the hallway, the sound of footsteps approaching, quick, deliberate. Someone was coming. Alex's heart skipped a beat. The man's expression turned grim. You have to go now. They'll be here any minute. Before Alex could react, the man grabbed him by the arm and pulled him toward the door. His grip was firm, but Alex didn't resist. He didn't have time. Whoever was coming could be dangerous, and he needed to get out of there. The man shoved him out into the hallway, but as Alex turned to look back, he saw the door to the room slowly creaking shut. The man's figure disappeared into the shadows behind it, leaving Alex standing alone in the hallway. Alex's mind was spinning. He couldn't leave, not yet. Not without the answers he had been so desperately seeking. But if he didn't leave now, he might not get another chance. His instincts screamed at him to run. The warning signs were all around him. He was being watched, he was being hunted. He darted down the hallway toward the stairs. But as he reached the landing, something cold and metallic glinted in the dim light ahead. It was a door. An old, rusted door that had been hidden behind layers of cobwebs and dust. Alex's breath caught. The door was different from the others. There was something unmistakably wrong about it, as though it had been placed there to keep something locked away. He hesitated for a moment before pushing it open. The air inside the room was thick with mildew and decay, but his eyes immediately landed on the object that lay in the center of the room. A large wooden crate, exactly like the one the man had shown him earlier, only this one was covered in bloodstains. Alex stepped closer, feeling the weight of the moment. As he reached for the lid, he heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind him, growing closer, louder. He turned quickly, his heart racing. A shadow moved in the corner of the room. Someone was coming. The footsteps behind Alex grew louder, echoing in the narrow room, the sound of a figure approaching swiftly. His heart raced, every instinct screaming for him to run, but his feet felt glued to the floor. He had found something. He had to know what was inside that crate, what it was that could tie all of this together. But the fear of being caught, of being too late, was almost overwhelming. The shadow in the corner of the room moved again, and Alex's blood ran cold. There was no time left to wonder who it was. He had to act. With one last glance at the crate, Alex spun around, rushing toward the door. He had barely taken a step when the figure in the shadows stepped into the light. It was the man, the one who had been following him all along. The man who had led him down this path of discovery and terror. His face was eerily calm, but there was a flicker of something dangerous behind his eyes, something that sent a wave of dread through Alex's chest. You don't know when to stop, do you? The man's voice was a low growl. I told you that you were digging too deep. And now look at what you've done." Alex's breath hitched in his throat. What is this? What's in the crate? What happened to the children? What are you involved in?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a slow step forward, blocking the door. "You've seen too much," he said softly. "The truth isn't something you should have uncovered, Alex. Some things are better left buried." Alex's eyes locked with his. "You can't keep me from the truth. I know you know something. I know you're connected to the children's disappearance. I know they were just the beginning of something far worse. What is it? What are you protecting?" The man's gaze flickered to the crate, his expression tightening. For a brief moment, Alex saw something almost like guilt pass over his face, but it was gone in an instant. "You think you've figured it all out, but you haven't. You've only scratched the surface. There's so much more you don't understand." The man reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a small, worn notebook. The pages were dog-eared, the ink faded. "This is the final clue," he said, tossing it onto the floor in front of Alex. "This is all you need to understand. This is how it ends." Alex hesitated for a moment before kneeling to pick up the notebook. His hands were shaking as he flipped through the pages, each one filled with cryptic symbols, sketches of faces, and strange, disjointed notes. The words on the pages were almost nonsensical, but there was one thing that stood out to Alex. A series of dates, names, and locations. The names of children, some crossed out, others highlighted in red ink. And then he saw it. The last name on the list was Beaumont. His heart skipped a beat. He looked up at the man, his mind reeling. What does this mean? What are all these names? Why are the Beaumont children on this list? The man didn't answer. Instead, his eyes flickered to the door. "It's too late," he whispered. "They're already here." Alex turned, his breath catching in his throat. The sound of footsteps, many footsteps, echoed in the hallway outside. It wasn't just one person. It was a group, and they were moving closer, converging on the room. The man grabbed Alex's arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "You have to get out of here. Now." "But the crate," Alex began, his mind racing. The crate held the answers. It had to. It was the key to everything. But the man was dragging him toward the door, pulling him away from the only lead he had left. "You don't get it, do you?" the man hissed. "They're watching us. They're always watching. This isn't just about the Beaumont children. It's about something bigger, something you can't comprehend. The ones behind all of this, they don't want you to know. They'll stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried." Alex's mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear, but one thing was clear. Whatever had happened to the Beaumont children was far from over. It wasn't just an isolated event. It was part of something much darker, much more insidious. And now Alex was in the center of it. The footsteps grew louder, and Alex could feel the tension building in the room. The man pulled him toward the back of the motel, through dark hallways, as though he knew the way. But Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was closing in on them, something worse than what he had already discovered. Suddenly, the man stopped, pushing Alex into a small, windowless room. It was hidden, tucked away behind a series of old storage rooms. The air was thick and stale, and the walls seemed to close in as soon as the door slammed shut behind them. "You need to stay here," the man said, his voice urgent. "Don't come out. No matter what you hear, you need to wait until it's safe." Alex shook his head, his thoughts swirling. What's going on? Who are these people? What do they want with me? The man's expression softened, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something almost like sympathy in his eyes. "You're not just a bystander in this, Alex. You're part of it now. You can't turn back. They'll come for you. They'll come for all of us." "Who will?" Alex demanded, but the man didn't answer. Instead, he glanced nervously at the door. Suddenly, there was a loud banging sound from the hallway, loud, insistent, as though someone was trying to break through the door. Alex's heart raced as the man turned to him one last time. "You have to go. Now," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Get out while you can. They'll know where you are. But you have a chance, Alex. Don't waste it." Without another word, the man slipped out of the room, leaving Alex alone in the dark. The sound of pounding footsteps echoed down the hall, growing louder, but Alex couldn't move. Fear paralyzed him, his body frozen in place as the reality of the situation set in. What had he stumbled into? What was this secret world that had been hidden beneath the surface of the Beaumont children's disappearance? Suddenly, the door behind him creaked open. The door creaked open, and Alex's heart slammed against his chest. He had no idea what awaited him on the other side, but one thing was certain. This was the moment he had been both dreading and yearning for. Whatever secrets had been hidden in the dark corners of Glenelg, whatever the true story behind the Beaumont children's disappearance was, he was about to face it head-on. He spun around, eyes wild, trying to make sense of the shadows that moved in the doorway. But when the figure stepped into the room, Alex froze. It wasn't the man, the one who had been guiding him. It wasn't anyone he had seen before. This person was tall, dressed in all black, their face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. The figure moved silently, gliding across the floor with a purpose, like they were one with the shadows. "Alex Mitchell," the figure said in a low, chilling voice. "I've been waiting for you." The words sent a shiver down Alex's spine. He didn't respond. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. The figure stepped forward, their presence suffocating. "Who are you?" Alex managed to croak. The figure didn't answer right away. Instead, they reached into their coat and pulled out a small object, placing it on the table in front of Alex. It was a picture, a faded photograph just like the ones Alex had seen before. But this one was different. The children were there, Jane, Arna, and Grant, playing on the beach, smiling and laughing as if nothing was wrong. But behind them, in the distance, there was a figure just like in the other photos. A man standing in the shadows, watching them. But this time, Alex could see him clearly. This man wasn't just some passerby or random observer. He was the same figure who had been lurking in the background of every photo. The same man who had haunted Alex's investigation from the start. He wasn't just a spectator, he was part of the story. Alex's breath caught in his throat as he looked up at the figure before him. What does this mean? Who is he? Why is he in every photo of the children? What do you know? The figure's eyes glimmered beneath the brim of the hat, and for a moment, there was a flicker of recognition. Something familiar in their stance. You've been asking the right questions, but you still don't have the full picture. You think the man in the photos was just watching, just waiting. But you're wrong. He was involved. He was part of something much bigger, something much more sinister. Alex's pulse quickened. What do you mean? What bigger thing? What's happening here? The figure took a step closer, and for the first time, Alex saw the cold, calculating look in their eyes. What you're uncovering, Alex, is a network. An organization that has been operating in the shadows for decades. The Beaumont children weren't just random victims. They were chosen. Chosen as part of a larger plan, a plan to keep control. And the man you've been seeing in the photographs? He's one of them. One of the people who has been pulling the strings for years. Alex staggered back, feeling his world spin around him. A network? An organization? What was this person talking about? No, this can't be right, Alex muttered. This is about the children. This is about what happened to them. The figure's voice grew colder. The children were part of a larger system, Alex. They were not the only ones taken. They were not the first. And they won't be the last. Alex's mind reeled. He felt like he was losing control of the situation. You're telling me this has been happening before? That other children, other families are part of this network? Yes, the figure said flatly. It's not just about the Beaumont children. It's about power, control, and manipulation. This organization has been behind countless disappearances over the years. They've been watching, waiting for the right time. The Beaumont children were just one part of a much larger plan. A plan that stretches across generations. Alex felt his knees weaken beneath him. The weight of the figure's words was too much. It was all starting to make sense in a way he hadn't imagined. But there was still so much that was left unanswered. Why the children? Why take them? Why not just end it there? Alex's voice was shaking with urgency. Because the children represent something, the figure replied, voice unwavering. They represent innocence, purity, the perfect pawns. They were taken to send a message, and to perpetuate a cycle of control, of fear, and of obedience. Those who are chosen are kept silent, kept hidden, and the few who dare to look deeper are silenced too. Alex stood frozen, trying to comprehend what the figure was saying. But why me? Why are you telling me this now? The figure's lips curled into a thin, cold smile. Because you've already gone too far, Alex. You're too deep in. You can't leave now. Suddenly, the door behind Alex slammed shut, and he whipped around, his heart hammering in his chest. The figure moved toward him. Their eyes locked on him with an intensity that made him freeze. You've been digging into something you shouldn't have, the figure said, their voice darkening. And now you'll pay the price. Before Alex could respond, a sharp pain shot through his chest, and he gasped for breath. He looked down, and to his horror, he saw blood seeping through his shirt. His knees buckled, and the world around him seemed to spin. The last thing he saw was the figure standing above him, their cold eyes looking down at him as if they had one. And in that moment, he realized that he had crossed a line. He had uncovered the truth, but the truth had come at a cost. The cost of his life. The world around Alex spun in an agonizing haze of pain and confusion. His breath was shallow, his vision blurred. His hand pressed weakly to his chest, but it only seemed to make the pain worse. He could feel the life draining out of him as the cold, stark reality of the figure's words echoed in his mind. You've gone too far. The words replayed over and over, haunting him as his body fought to remain conscious. But there was something else, too, a chilling realization that gnawed at the edge of his fading thoughts. He had uncovered a truth too dangerous, too powerful for anyone to know. And now he was paying the price. Through the haze of pain, Alex struggled to lift his head. The figure who had been his guide, the one who had lured him into this world of shadows and disappearances, stood above him. But now there was no sense of pity, no sympathy. Only cold indifference. You should have stopped, the figure said, their voice as chilling as the room around them. But you had to know. You always have to know. Alex's vision flickered, his eyelids growing heavy. He couldn't focus on the figure's face anymore. Everything was starting to blur together. But just before the darkness consumed him entirely, he heard a faint sound, like a whisper in the wind. It was a voice he recognized but couldn't place. Alex, listen to me. He tried to respond, to force words from his dry, trembling lips, but his body wouldn't obey. He was slipping away, falling into the abyss of unconsciousness. But then, with a sudden, jarring force, something inside him snapped. His eyes fluttered open one last time, and he saw her, a figure standing in the doorway, bathed in a soft, ethereal light. It was her, the woman he had seen in the photographs from the beginning. The woman who had been connected to the case from the start, the one who had disappeared under strange circumstances. Her face was clear now, her expression determined, her eyes filled with a quiet strength. You haven't lost yet, Alex, she whispered, her voice calm and steady. You still have a chance. With a burst of energy, Alex struggled to sit up. The pain in his chest was still there, but it no longer felt like it was consuming him. He looked at the woman who was standing by the door, beckoning him to follow her. Who are you? He managed to croak, his voice weak but urgent. What is all of this? What do they want? The woman stepped forward, her presence like a bomb on the raw, aching reality of the situation. I'm here to help you. To show you the truth that's been hidden for so long. Alex reached out a trembling hand, trying to hold onto whatever shred of hope he could find. Please, tell me. Tell me what happened to the children. Tell me what's really going on. The woman's eyes softened with empathy, but there was a sadness in her gaze. The truth you're looking for is buried deep. It's been buried for decades, hidden away from the world. The Beaumont children weren't the first, Alex. They were just one link in a long chain of disappearances. She moved closer, her gaze never leaving his. There's a group, a powerful, influential group that has orchestrated these disappearances for years. They call themselves the Circle. The Circle. Alex whispered, his throat dry. What is it? What do they want with the children? They want control, the woman said, her voice filled with quiet rage. Control over the system. Control over people. The children, every child they take, is a means to an end. They disappear, hidden away, kept in places like this, places where no one can find them. They're taken to keep the power in the hands of those who control the narrative. Alex shook his head, trying to grasp what she was saying. But why the Beaumont children? Why did they pick them? Why me? The woman's eyes flickered with a mix of sorrow and understanding. They were chosen, Alex. They always choose the innocent, the vulnerable. And you? You were chosen because you started asking questions. You wanted to know the truth, and now you're too deep to escape. But you can help me, right? Alex gasped. You know the way out. You know the truth. The woman's face hardened, her expression a mix of determination and fear. I do. But I can only show you the way, Alex. You have to find the rest yourself. The circle won't stop. They'll hunt you, they'll make sure you stay quiet, or worse. Before she could finish, the ground beneath them began to shake, a low rumble filling the air. Alex stumbled to his feet, gripping the table for support. The woman didn't flinch, but her eyes grew wide with alarm. They're here, she whispered. They know you're close. Alex turned toward the door. The sounds of footsteps grew louder. Voices were calling out from the hallway, too close, too many. Panic surged in him, but the woman grabbed his arm, her grip firm. You have to go now, she urged. You have to leave, Alex. Before it's too late. With one last glance at the woman, Alex ran toward the door. His chest burned with every breath, but he pushed forward, desperate to escape the nightmare that had become his reality. The hallway outside was dimly lit, but Alex could see shadows moving, figures watching him from the corners. The circle was here. They were closing in. He didn't look back. He ran. Through the back door of the motel, through the alleyways, through the streets of Glenelg. He ran as fast as his legs could carry him, knowing that if he stopped for even a second, they would catch him. The fear was all-consuming, but he couldn't stop. Not now. As he ran, his thoughts raced. The Beaumont children, the man in the photographs, the circle, it was all connected. The secrets that had been buried for so long were now coming to light. But Alex knew this was just the beginning. The truth wasn't over. It had only just begun. Alex's legs burned as he pushed himself harder, faster. His mind driven by the urgent need to escape. He didn't look back, he couldn't afford to. He had no idea where he was going, no destination in mind. All he knew was that the truth had become a trap, and the more he uncovered, the more he was surrounded by those who would stop at nothing to silence him. The night air in Glenelg was sharp and cold, biting at his skin as he sprinted through narrow streets and alleys. His chest heaved with each breath, the blood in his veins pumping with fear. He could hear the distant echo of footsteps, the unmistakable sound of people chasing him. They were closing in, and he knew it. But something else pulsed beneath the panic. It was the truth. The truth about the circle, the truth about the Beaumont children, about all the others who had disappeared over the years. It was all coming together now. He had uncovered pieces, hidden details that no one else had seen, and it terrified him. As he ran, Alex's thoughts turned to the woman, the one who had warned him, guided him, and shown him the way forward. She had been his only ally, the only person who had understood what he was up against. But where was she now? Had she already escaped? Had she been caught? Alex's breath hitched as he remembered the final warning she had given him. You have to go now. He knew she had been right. There was no turning back. He had to get out of Glenelg. He had to survive long enough to tell the world the truth. He could feel the weight of it all, the urgency of the situation. The circle was everywhere, watching every move he made. The distant sounds of the footsteps grew louder, now accompanied by muffled voices calling out in the night. Alex's pulse raced. His instincts screamed at him to turn, to find a way out. But the streets around him were unfamiliar, twisting and turning as he ran. He needed help. He needed answers. But most of all, he needed to stay alive long enough to get away. Alex finally rounded a corner, nearly colliding with a parked car as he skidded to a stop. His legs were starting to buckle beneath him, the adrenaline beginning to wear off. He looked around quickly, trying to assess his surroundings. The street was empty, but he couldn't afford to stay here. In the distance, the silhouette of a figure emerged, stepping out from the shadows of a nearby building. Alex froze, his heart skipping a beat. The figure was tall, moving deliberately, too deliberately. Alex's eyes narrowed as the figure stepped closer, the dim light revealing the faint outline of a man dressed in dark clothes. The same figure from the photographs, the one who had been watching the children all along. It was him. Alex's breath caught in his throat. What was he doing here? Why hadn't he left? Why hadn't he disappeared with the others? Alex's mind raced, but there was no time to think. He had to move. He had to run. Before Alex could turn, the man spoke. "I see you've come a long way, Alex," the man said, his voice low and cold. "But it's too late. You've already crossed the point of no return." Alex's heart skipped a beat, the realization crashing down on him. This was it. This was the end. "What do you want from me?" Alex demanded, his voice shaking. "Why are you doing this? What do you know about the children? About the circle?" The man's face remained impassive, his expression almost unreadable. But there was something in his eyes, something that felt far too familiar. "You've seen too much," the man said simply, his voice laced with finality. "And now you have to be stopped." Alex took a step back, the fear creeping back into his veins. But he couldn't let it control him. He couldn't give up now. He had to fight. "You're not going to stop me?" Alex said, his voice trembling but filled with resolve. "You're not going to win." The man tilted his head slightly, almost as if he were considering Alex's words. "You don't understand, do you? It's not about winning. It's about survival. You've dug too deep, Alex. You're already part of the system now. And we don't let people like you get away." With a sudden movement, the man lunged at Alex, his hand reaching for him, but Alex reacted faster. He darted to the side, narrowly avoiding the man's grasp. His body was still heavy with exhaustion, but his mind was clear. He couldn't outrun him forever, but he could try to get away. The man hissed in frustration, his movements becoming more erratic. Alex could hear his breath quickening as he followed closely behind, but Alex knew he couldn't keep running forever. He had to face the truth. He had to confront it. Without thinking, Alex veered into a narrow alley, hoping to lose the man in the maze of streets. The shadows seemed to close in around him as he darted through the alley, his footsteps pounding against the cobblestone. But he wasn't alone. He could hear the man's footsteps behind him, closing the gap. Then, ahead of him, there was a figure, a familiar face. It was the woman, the one who had guided him. She was standing there, waiting for him in the shadows. "Alex, this way," she called urgently, her voice carrying through the dark. He didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward her, the sound of the man's pursuit growing louder with every step. The woman moved quickly, leading him toward a small, hidden door at the far end of the alley. As they approached, she grabbed Alex's arm, pulling him inside the doorway just as the man came into view. "Go," she shouted. They rushed inside, and the door slammed shut behind them with a heavy thud. The woman quickly locked it, breathing heavily as she turned to face Alex. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice urgent. "They'll be looking for us. But we can't stop now. We have to finish what you started." Alex's head was spinning. What do you mean? What do we do now? I can't just keep running." The woman's eyes softened. "You have to keep going. The truth is buried, Alex. But we can't let it die. You're the only one who can expose them. You've seen the signs, the connections. The circle won't stop until everything is buried. But you're the one who can bring them down." Alex felt the weight of her words. The truth. The circle. The lives that had been lost. He had come so far. But was he truly ready to take on something so dangerous? "You have to make a choice, Alex," the woman said, her voice steady and firm. "You can walk away, live in fear, and let them win. Or you can face them. You can fight. The choice is yours." Alex stared at her, the realization finally hitting him. This wasn't just about the Beaumont children anymore. This was about all the children, all the victims, all the lives lost to this shadowy group. It wasn't just about survival, it was about justice. He had already come too far to turn back. "I'm ready," Alex said, his voice stronger now, filled with resolve. "I'll expose them. I'll make them pay." The woman gave him a small, knowing smile, and for the first time, Alex felt like he wasn't alone in this fight. The path ahead would be dangerous, but it was the only way forward. The door behind them rattled, and the sound of footsteps grew louder once more. The circle was still out there, but Alex had made his choice. He would see this through to the end.